So excellent. Recording has begun. Excellent. Thank you, Andrea. And thank you all for being here. Okay, so let's go to the next slide here. And we're just going to start tonight with a disclaimer, religion disclaimer. We will be using religious language tonight. And I know that people come to the table with a lot of baggage around religion, especially bad experiences through institutional and organized religion. And just want to start off with a disclaimer. There's going to be a lot of religious talk tonight, but I assure you that we are not going to be using any of the language of the religion of the empire, that this is going to be the religion of destroying the empire and building a world of love. So we're going to be using a moral language, and the particular moral vocabularies that I, as a rabbi and an activist, have are the Jewish tradition and the tradition of nonviolence. And really, though, just want to note more than any particular religion or particular definition or understanding of the divine, the ideas and vocabulary tonight are about understanding the force and Jedi mind tricking the Empire to turn against the dark side. That's what this is really about. So just there's that religious disclaimer. So we're going to start just by talking about a rabbi very briefly. He's going to be a character in a lot of tonight's lesson. This is Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. He was born in Poland in 1907. He died in New York City in 1972. He wrote many, many, many books in the 7 languages that he knew. He got 2 rabbinical degrees while getting a PhD from the University of Berlin, wrote his dissertation the same week that Hitler came to power in 1933, and got out of the country in 1939 as a stateless Pole. Ended up in England, ended up in the U.S., where he taught at the major conservative rabbinical school in New York City for his whole career. He was an activist. He was a true mensch, and we'll learn more about him. But just wanted to introduce you to him and give a little bit of biography. And this is a line from a telegram that he wrote to John F. Kennedy. So when we talk about approaching politicians and power brokers, Heschel is certainly a model to follow. And this was a line he wrote in a telegram to Kennedy about the civil rights movement. And he implored Kennedy to act as the hour calls for moral grandeur and spiritual audacity. So when asked by an NBC reporter, what is the meaning of God? Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel replied with this quote here. Oops, sorry. He said, there is meaning beyond absurdity. I'm sorry, there is meaning beyond mystery. Holiness conquers absurdity, and without holiness, we will sink in absurdity. This is Heschel's definition of God here. There is meaning beyond mystery. Holiness conquers absurdity, and without holiness, we will sink in absurdity. And so what do we mean in this context by absurdity? Right? This is what Heschel said. Absurdity is the greatest threat, is the greatest challenge to existence, the greatest challenge to all activities, to political activities, economic activities, to all ideas of progress are encounters with absurdity. And what does absurdity mean? Well, we're talking about the absurdity of policy violence and the corruption that drives it. It is absurd that there are 4.2 million poor people in Pennsylvania, 33% of us, when we live in the richest country in the history of the world. That's absurd. It is absurd that so many of us suffer needlessly while billionaires shoot, for example, penis-shaped vanity rockets into space. And it's absurd that we value extreme property rights over human rights. It's absurd that we sacrifice ourselves and our neighbors and our children on the altars of greed. These are all absurd things. One specific absurdity we're going to zoom in on for a second here is debt. And it is absurd that the average household debt in Pennsylvania is $48,300. The average student debt is $6,540 per household. Over 10% of Pennsylvanians have medical debt currently sitting in collections. And it's especially absurd that there are 87,000 children in Pennsylvania with close to $15 million in lunch debt. That's all absurd, right? But holiness conquers absurdity. And so let's go to the next slide here. Right, systemic and predatory household debt, student debt, medical debt, and lunch debt is absurd. and it contrasts with one of our highest and holiest ideals, liberty. And this is written into the Liberty Bell. The inscription on the Liberty Bell is from Leviticus chapter 25, verse 10, and it says, "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." And the chapter in Leviticus very clearly defines what that means, and it means debt cancellation. It also means abolition of slaves, and the Liberty Bell was used very much during the abolitionist movement as a symbol and a value, a holy ideal. And the holy actions of groups like our Poor People's Campaign friends and the Debt Collective conquer the absurdity that is the suffering that is caused by extreme debt in the richest country in the history of the world. And the PA Debt Collective takes holy actions to push all of us to encounter the suffering caused by debt, cry out, and live up to our holy values, especially the value of liberty. And this alignment of values and actions is the definition of integrity. It happens when holiness conquers absurdity. And we're going to touch on integrity again in a second. But first, we're going to study holiness tonight. We're going to understand how to produce it by weaving together three connected streams of thought: the prophets, nonviolence, and Musar. We are not going to do any of these subjects complete justice, not even close to it, because each of these is a PhD course and a half. And we have stay with me till 8:45. I think that's how long this is going to take. Let's start with the prophets here. And let's just talk about who they are. Right? The prophets refers to the people and the characters in the Hebrew Bible who are called the prophets. These are some books by them: Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Hosea, Amos, others that are in different books: Nathan, Daniel, Moses, and many, many others throughout the rest of the Hebrew Bible. And they present a moral worldview, and they present an ideology of justice and compassion that very much inspires people in justice movements to this day. As Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel said back in his time, which was just a couple generations ago in the civil rights era especially, the spirit of the prophet, the message of the prophet is very much alive. The National Faith Leaders team in the Poor People's Campaign calls itself the Prophetic Council. The spirit is very much alive. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel himself was a prophet, according to those who knew him, like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said Dr. King said, "One of the truly great men of our day and age, a truly great prophet," about Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. And Dr. King as well was a prophet, or at least according to Heschel, who said, "Where in America today do we hear a voice like the voice of the prophets of Israel? Martin Luther King is a sign that God has not forsaken the United States of America." So who are the prophets? What do they believe? Heschel says that the prophets are the kind of person who combines a very deep love, a very powerful dissent, a painful rebuke with unwavering hope. That's the character of a prophet. The prophets believed in a universe that cares, that wants us to live in peace and harmony, that suffers when we suffer, that cries when we cry, that celebrates when we celebrate. They believed that there is an arc of the moral universe and that it bends toward justice. That, as Heschel wrote, justice is a divine concern. The desire of the world is for humanity to live in peace, and in fighting for justice, we are truly worshiping the divine. A key prophetic message is that to help bend the arc of the moral universe toward justice, we need to force the encounter. We march, we lobby, we engage in direct action. Like Moses going to Pharaoh, or Jeremiah going to the temple in Jerusalem, or Jonah going to Nineveh, or Dr. King going to the White House, you going to Harrisburg, the prophets force the encounter. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote, "It is necessary to go to Nineveh, where Jonah the prophet was sent. It is also vital to learn how to stand before God. For many of us, the march from Selma to Montgomery was both protest and prayer. Legs are not lips and walking is not kneeling, and yet our legs uttered songs. Even without words, our march was worship. When the prophet forces the encounter, the hope and the prayer is that the response will be service. As the Musar rabbi, practitioner and Professor Emmanuel Levinas said, when you see the face of the other, you are ordered and ordained to service. The act of forcing that encounter and demanding a response of love and service is the prophetic and biblical understanding of the word sacrifice. The Hebrew word korban literally translates to encounter, to draw near to hug. This in front of us on the screen here, this is the priestly blessing, the words that were prayed biblically when a sacrifice was offered. The goal of a sacrifice is to encounter our highest and holiest ideals and get a response of sympathy and service, to see and to be seen, to love and to be loved. May God bless and protect you. May the face of the divine shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the face of the divine turn toward you, and may there be peace. Right? The prophet seeks the encounter through sacrifice and gets a response of service, forces the encounter and gets service. Corruption is the opposite of this. Corruption causes a systemic failure to encounter. It causes a systemic failure to sacrifice. It makes the people invisible and unheard, and that indifference produces suffering. It says in Isaiah, let's start with the Deuteronomy one, do not take a bribe because a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of the righteous. The bribery creates a bubble, creates a swamp effect, a bubble effect, a beltway effect. We have so many words for this, where you have indifference, where you are not seen, you cannot encounter, you do not get a response of love, you cannot sacrifice. And the result of this, as Isaiah the prophet points out, your rulers are rebels, partners with thieves, they chase after bribes, the widow and the orphan's cause does not come before them. Right? Corruption causes a systemic failure to encounter. So, how do we respond to that? We encounter. We force the encounter. We sacrifice. The prophetic way to make holiness conquer absurdity is to encounter each other. That's the key ingredient. Encounter each other, and then act in deep sympathy and solidarity with each other in the world, and force the encounter with the oppressor, break their indifference, and make them care. As Heschel wrote, the situation, As Heschel wrote, the situation of a person immersed in the prophet's words is one of being exposed to a ceaseless shattering of indifference, and one needs a skull of stone to remain callous to such blows. Legislators need a skull of stone to remain callous to the blows delivered by community-powered lobbyists. We make them responsive. Rabbi Arnie Eisen, a professor in New York, gives us an example of what a Heschel sacrifice looked like. This is his recounting of one of the first times that he met him. And he wrote, I met him in Washington, D.C., and saw a tired, bedraggled Abraham Joshua Heschel who had spent his day lobbying against the war in Vietnam. This act of sacrificing, of forcing the encounter, and getting a response of service, of love, of responsibility, this is called nonviolence. Nonviolence often gets a reputation for being passive, but this is just completely wrong. Sacrificing, forcing the encounter requires intense activity. As Gandhi said, this power is not passive resistance. Indeed, it calls for intense activity. And nonviolence also gets a reputation of being weak or ineffective or based in lofty dreams instead of cold, hard reality. So I just wanted to address that and nip it in the bud with this Mike Tyson quote here. To make a point, delusion is only delusional if you don't accomplish your goals. Nonviolence wins. It accomplishes its goals. It cannot lose. Actually, let's just go back to that Mike Tyson quote for a second. If people just want to sit with that for a sec. The man really has a way with words. Delusion is only delusional if you don't accomplish your goals. Okay, so when you force the encounter and you try to use holiness to conquer absurdity, what you're doing is creating a win-win situation for yourself and a win-lose situation for the oppressor. Nonviolence, as Gandhi said, is always successful. It can never meet with defeat. And let's go to the next slide here. So this is just a game theory box here, just to map out what a decision looks like. And this is the decision you have: force the encounter or stay home. Those are your two options. And the politician you're talking with has two options: do the right thing or do the wrong thing. And if the politician does the right thing and you force the encounter and the politician does the right thing, you score a 3. This is just the math of decision making. We're jumping into a whole other thing here to explain this. And the politician also gets a 3. They've done the right thing. Life is good. They get celebrated by the public. They get to seek higher office. They get to run with this as a feather in their cap. They've done the right thing. We've done the right thing. We've gotten the bill passed. We've helped democracy. If we force the encounter and they do the wrong thing, they're going to get a -3 score here, because we're going to see to it, and we're going to talk about that in a bit. We're going to publicize their response. We're going to generate pressure on them. We're going to make them answer for protecting corruption, and they're going to end up losing. They're going to get a -3 score. Meanwhile, if they do the wrong thing, but we force the encounter, we still score a 1, because we've generated that first step of pressure that we can escalate. We're building towards something. We've learned more. The movement has grown. Our power has grown. We continue to push in the right direction. We come back another day until they end up doing the right thing. And if we stay home and they do the right thing, that's just impossible. So that's just not going to happen there. We have impossible written there. And if you stay home and they do the wrong thing, they get a -1. They continue living in a culture of corruption that eats away at them and their communities as well. And we get a -1 if we stay home either way. And we'll talk more about that at the end of this class. So nonviolence can never win. The point being, we're going to score a positive score no matter what. They have a clear win-lose. Do the right thing, they're going to score a 3. The wrong thing, it's going to be a negative outcome for them. You keep forcing the encounter until they do the right thing. Musar. Let's dive into some thoughts here. So integrity, if you remember, that is when our values and our actions are aligned. Our goal is to have public servants with integrity, not politicians whose actions do not align with their own or the public's values of fairness and democracy. We want public servants who do the right thing, who make that choice in the last slide to do the right thing. Musar offers insights into our lack of integrity and how to address it. As Rabbi David Jaffe wrote, there is a gap between our ethics and what we know is right and our actual practice. Musar comes to bridge that gap between what we know is right in our heads, the motivation we feel in our hearts, and the actions we do with our hands. It comes to bring and bind those together. Let's define Musar here. I've been throwing this word around. It is a Jewish stream of thought and practice that goes back several thousand years. It's often translated as ethical discipline or spiritual discipline. And the goal of Musar is to become a holy person, to generate holiness, to live up to their infinite obligation to the other, to live up to your infinite obligation to the other. And you know of some popular practitioners of Musar. Pennsylvania's own Benjamin Franklin was actually a Musar practitioner. And this is just an excerpt from his journal about why he pursued Musar. He wrote, "It was about this time I conceived the bold and arduous project of arriving at moral perfection." Side note, that is, I mean, who sets out on a journey like this? I wish to live without committing any fault at all, at any time. I would conquer all that either natural inclination, custom, or company might lead me into. As I knew, or thought I knew, what was right and wrong, I did not see why I might not always do the one and avoid the other, but I soon found I had undertaken a task of more difficulty than I had imagined. This task was difficult. He used Musar. Let's keep going. So one of Musar's foundational questions is, why do we do the wrong thing even when we know what the right thing is? Why do we lack integrity? Or as former Speaker of the Pennsylvania State House Benjamin Franklin wrote it, as I knew or thought I knew what was right and wrong, I did not see why I might not always do the one and avoid the other. Why do we do the wrong thing even when we know what the right thing is? And because politicians are known for doing the wrong thing, even when they are fully aware of what the right thing is, or what the public perceives as the right thing, Musar is a very helpful moral and psychological frame to understand the art of lobbying in an immoral, insane, and absurd environment. So let's dive into it. First, what follows is going to sound a bit Freudian, and that's because Freud was a Viennese Jew who grew up in a Jewish environment where Musar was known and practiced. The fundamental human outlook here is that every human being has both a Yetzer HaTov, a good inclination, and a Yetzer Hara, an evil inclination. Another way to translate them is the Yetzer HaTov is selflessness, and the Yetzer Hara is selfishness. The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, the selfish inclination. This impulse, the Yetzer Hara, it sees the world through a lens of scarcity and insecurity. There isn't enough. I need to get mine now. The Yetzer Hara values ambition and power, and it can be very overprotective of ourself. It's constantly responding to threats against itself. There are threats everywhere, and its job is to protect itself against those threats. It will often activate and overreact in deceiving and harmful ways, and it can be expressed as reactionary violence or greed for money and power. I'll give you a very minor example of it that we all encounter every single day, or a lot of us do. Have you ever been walking into a building and there's somebody behind you and you don't hold the door for them because you feel like you're in a hurry and need to get by? This is something that happens to me. That's my Yetzer Hara jumping up and protecting myself from a perceived threat that I'm late for something and that I have to go and move faster. But I don't. That threat's not real. It's being overreactive, jumping up and protecting me from that threat. This happens all the time. You walk past somebody on the street who's hungry. They ask for a little bit of money for food, and you think to yourself, I can't spare that, I'll go broke, which is not a rational response. It's you being overreactive, overprotective of yourself and in that situation. So the Yetzer Hara is trying to sort through what's a threat, what isn't a threat, and that often responds with extreme violence and greed for money and power. It often can lead, it's selfish. That's what it is. And this Yetzer Hara is not inherently bad. Oh, sorry. It's not inherently bad. Without the Yetzer Hara and a sense of selfishness, one would never buy a house, one would never eat and sustain their body properly, one would never procreate, one would never do the selfish things that get us through life, that keep us alive, our individual impulses, our basic needs. And the greed, the pride, the ambition that's contained in the Yetzer Hara, it can even be used for achieving good, like when our ambition is pursued through doing good. The selfish inclination, it's natural, it's necessary, but as long as it doesn't dominate, it's okay. Because despite the necessity to think about yourself in order to stay alive, if you only think about yourself, then you cause great damage in the world. And while the Yetzer Hara, that instinct towards self-preservation, it's important and it needs to be listened to sometimes, it often overreacts to perceived threats and deceives us into selfish behavior when we know what the selfless right thing to do is. The Yetzer HaTov, the contrast here, is the selfless inclination, the good inclination, the inclination toward others. Our concern for each other, our responsibility toward one another, our altruism, our love, our service, our sacrifice, our worship, our relationships, our communities. This is the trust that holds everything together, our desire to be good, and to do good for each other. The Yetzer HaTov sees the world through the lens of abundance. There is enough. We can all prosper together. And the thoughts, words, and actions of the Yetzer HaTov, the service for the other, hold together communities and civilized society in peace and justice. And if we don't trust each other to do the right thing for each other, we fall apart as a society and we suffer as individuals. The Yetzer HaTov is where deep, renewable joy comes from relationships with each other, service toward each other, and the deep and secure community that human beings thrive in. And those are the two impulses according to Musar. And as the evolutionary biologist E.O. Wilson sums it up, the human condition, selfish at one time, selfless at another, the two impulses often conflict. These inclinations are in conflict. We need both our selfish and selfless impulses, but the selfish Yetzer Hara cannot be in an overreactive and dominant position. And our current political and economic system is oriented almost fully toward the Yetzer Hara. It's a dog-eat-dog world where scarcity abounds. We reward the accumulation of money and power, and egotistical narcissists rise to high places. That leaves little room for love, for service, for sacrifice, for altruism, for being responsible for each other. And the primary obligation of lobbying is to move public officials from their Yetzer Hara, their sense of self-preservation, their selfish ego, their greed for money and power, their direct and momentary satisfaction, to their Yetzer HaTov, their sense for the other, their altruistic soul, their lasting joy, their heart of service. That's conversion, as Gandhi called it. But if you cannot move them to their Yetzer HaTov, at the very least, you can make it clear to their Yetzer Hara that it's the best move for self-preservation and ambition to pretend to be following the Yetzer HaTov. And that's often what happens. So let's talk about talking to their Yetzer HaTov, speaking directly to their selfless inclination, and some ways to do that. Ask them what they care about. Get them talking about, from the place of their Yetzer HaTov. Get them talking from the place of what they believe in. Identify their highest and holiest ideals. Figure out what's meaningful to them. Ask them why they came to Harrisburg. Ask them who convinced you to run. Why? Why are you here? What do you work on? What are your issues? Let them explain their passion. Listen to them well. Let them explain the reasons why they wanted to become public servants. Really let them tell you their hopes, their dreams, and their values. And ask good questions. Sympathize with them. Listen and let them express their Yetzer HaTov safely. Ask them, how has it been going with that issue? Any progress? And use their concern for the other to arrive at questions like, so do you think anything's going to happen on that issue while corruption is legal and your colleagues are on the take? If we had a sane and functional legislature, that issue and its suffering would have been solved decades ago. But nothing happens here because it's so clogged with corruption. And if we don't fix the process, will the results ever change? Right? You want to really get them thinking from their sense of the other, their concern for the other, and make your case from that place. Another way to really get to their Yetzer HaTov is to tell a story. You really need to make them see your suffering. You really need to make them see their voters suffering. You need to make their Yetzer HaTov sympathize with you. You need to tell your truth and make them understand the deep pain that brings you there. Why are you there in front of them? And they need to understand the great hope that you're carrying as well. You need to evoke their concern for the other and make them responsible to you and people who are suffering. Share your story. Why are you there? Who are you fighting for? What is hurting you? And we're going to do an exercise on this later. Just remember a quick story of one time on a lobbying day, there was two of our folks, Maddie and Linda, from out in Western PA. And there was a legislator who wasn't meeting with them, didn't want to meet. Secretary said he was busy. They looked in through his door. It was slightly ajar. He was on his phone, feet kicked up on his desk. He obviously wasn't busy. And Maddie just burst in and started crying and said, "We're going to talk. This is serious." And explained why it was serious to Maddie, and explained, what issues mattered to her. And Linda had I think a new hip at that point, and she had one of those walkers with the wheels, and she basically, one of the scooters, and she wheeled herself on in and explained why this was important to her. And they got the meeting. They had a serious talk with the legislator, and they ended up, moving him into productive action and signing onto the bill. Tell your story, be insistent, make them see your suffering, really make them see your suffering, tell your story. Metaphor. Metaphor is not something to be underrated when it comes to evoking somebody's Yetzer HaTov, because you have to evade the defensiveness of the Yetzer Hara, and you have to help them relate to and understand our issues, and metaphors really help with that. They allow us to break down that defensive wall. They provide legislators with an image of something they can relate to and help them understand our issues. Metaphor helps us approach difficult truths and reach a point of understanding, even if we can't really name what it is that we understand. A capacity for metaphor inspires creative reflection and understanding. One metaphor that's very helpful in lobbying is relationships. The prophet Hosea really leans on this the metaphorical fertile territory when it comes to explaining that we're all in partnership with each other, that we are a cooperative species, that we're in partnership with the world. And if you can kind of lean on relationship metaphors, family, team, friendships, partnerships, you can really get through to people. There was one representative, Representative Godshall, who actually died not too recently, I think, a few years ago. One of our folks was meeting with him, and he was just impossible to really pin down. His Yetzer Hara was very active. It was deflecting every approach to talk with him about the gift ban. He was saying really absurd things to get away from conversation about it. And then finally, our person said, he noticed that he had a wedding ring on, and he said, "Representative, I see that you're married, and that's a really important relationship. That's a covenantal relationship. And so is the relationship between we the people and our government. And it's supposed to be a government of, by, for the people. And we're supposed to have an honest and trusting relationship, just like in a marriage. And that's impossible when we see you cheating on us with lobbyists and taking bribes and taking gifts. And that violates the trust, and a relationship can't work without trust. And a marriage can end. A marriage can end in divorce, so there might be some hurt, and that happens. But this relationship between us and you can't end. And if it ends, we're really in deep trouble. That's called a failed state or a civil war. So we need to do the work to repair this relationship." And that broke through to the representative. He understood. He was able to relate it to something that he understood, and he signed on to the bill and moved forward with it. Right. So lean into relationship metaphor. It's very good territory. Another one is fairness. Fairness is a very relatable concept that people really do feel deep in their gut, because, and it's also a simple, widely applicable theme. Sometimes the deepest metaphorical territory you're going to get into with legislators is a love of Penn State football, and that's actually one of the more common ones that you're gonna get yourself into, and that's okay, and you can work with it by using the theme of fairness or the theme of trust within a team. You can say to them, you can't take the referees for a rodeo in Wyoming, right? Like the gambling companies did, with our last House Majority Leader. If they did that, would he trust any of the refs' calls if they just went on a 6-day vacation with a whole bunch of members of the other team? Why would he trust the decisions that the majority leader's making? I mean, aren't they compromised too? Right? Just using metaphors, using comparisons, using stories, very, very helpful. And really just keep, this is going to come from you. Draw your own metaphors from common vocabularies, things that are meaningful to you, things that you're knowledgeable of. Could be sports, could be Pennsylvania history, could be constitutional language, could be the Bible is a very common vocabulary in the state legislature. Could be TV shows, Simpsons quotes, Jeopardy references, whatever it is to kind of help them understand in their own words and their own vocabulary, can help really activate their Yetzer HaTov, really get them understanding and active. And let's keep going here to speaking to their Yetzer Hara. And I wish to just take one quick side note here to say, week 5, we're going to be really doing the nuts and bolts and mechanics of lobbying, and we're going to review some of this and do a lot of practice. So if you have good thoughts, good ideas, write them down, and we're going to come back to them. So speaking to their Yetzer Hara, what do they care about? What do legislators care about? What are the threats that we present to their Yetzer Hara? How does their selfish impulse protect itself from us? Are they valid? And can we work with them? Is there territory within their power and ambition for us to work with? So let's start with one piece of their Yetzer Hara here, their self-image. And we are a serious and valid threat to their identity. We are a serious and valid threat to their identity. Most legislators wake up in the morning and go to work and go through their day with a story in their head that is not, I am corrupt and my institution is corrupt. That's not what they tell themselves when they're shaving in the morning. Their self-identity is that they're doing good work. They have all sorts of reasons and rationalizations, but the story is not, I'm corrupt and my institution is corrupt. And to get them to support our bills, we're telling them a very harsh truth that often shatters their sense of self. And we need to be compassionate and patient, and this can be a very painful process for them. One quick story, we met with a new rep, and he was very bothered by what we were telling him about the behavior of his colleagues and the systemic corruption. And he denied it. He said, that's not who we are. That's not who I am. That's not what we do here. People come here to do good. I came here to do good. And then a year later, we met with him again, and he opened with an apology and saying, this place is really broken. How can I help? Right? It took him time to redefine his self-image, and we were a very big threat to that. And so politicians will often deflect and not act on our bills because it requires a threat to their self-image. Right? The Yetzer Hara will protect itself and rear its ugly head. Another example of that is Jordan Harris. There's a very powerful legislator in the House Democratic leadership. And he said he denies the premise that money buys power, because if it did, he would be corrupt. And that is a self-image that he cannot accept. That his identity cannot accept that. He cannot be defined by that. But he doesn't want to be that. And so we play to the person who they think they are. Because once we break through that bubble of indifference, we use our humanity to become the arbiter of what is right and wrong and create a moral standard that they have to live up to in order to maintain the story they tell about themselves. If they want to be good people, they have to make corruption illegal. And we get to set that metric. We get to set that test. There was a meeting with John Fetterman back when he was lieutenant governor about a bill to end a welfare program that the Poor People's Campaign was fighting to keep. And one thing that Fetterman kept coming back to again and again is that Tom Wolfe is a compassionate man. Tom Wolfe is a compassionate man. Tom Wolfe is a compassionate man. And we kept saying compassionate men don't cut programs for the last, the least, and the lost of us. Compassionate men don't hurt homeless people. That's not compassion. And we were really rocking Fetterman's his image of his boss, Governor Wolfe, but also his own image of himself. And he ended up actually doing a little bit to prevent that from being cut. It still got cut in the end. Wolfe proved himself to not be a compassionate man. Fetterman did pull a stunt on the Senate floor, for those who might remember, when Katie Muth was reading the letter from a homeless man. And Fetterman, I'm not going to go into this tangent. The point is that you can really challenge their self-identity and make them live up to a standard that you get to set, that we the people get to set for them. We're also a serious threat to their collective identity. We are a very serious threat to their collective identity. one of the first things, or one of the easiest things to really get to, if you fail at conversion, if you fail at speaking to their Yetzer HaTov, is to really just challenge the collective self-image. Speak to how they think they are in the good party. Everybody thinks their party's the good party. And make them prove it. Are you really better than the other party? Speak to both parties' corruption, challenge them to be the better party. Say things like, the first party to make corruption illegal is going to win every election for 3 generations. Right? Make them want to boost their own collective self-image, give them an opportunity to do it, challenge them to do it. And also, speak to the legitimacy of the institution. Speak to how only 11% of Pennsylvanians think there is little corruption in state government, how only 15 to 20% of Americans trust the federal government to do the right thing all or most of the time. Let them know that we do not trust anything that they do until they make bribery illegal. Challenge the legitimacy of the institution. Speak to that part of their Yetzer Hara. Make them be prideful about their institution, about their collective identity. And to evoke this, it's okay to, and we sometimes do this, especially if a meeting is not going well, growl at their physical safety to get a serious point across to their Yetzer Hara sense of self-preservation, that it's safer to deal with us as a collective, for their collective image, than it is to not deal with us. I think it's probably less than 5 times in meetings, I've gone into the JFK quote, "Those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable." Speak to that sense of self-preservation in their Yetzer Hara and let it know that it's safer to deal with us, to deal with a peaceful revolution, to deal with the reforms and concessions that we're asking for. If the meeting's going very poorly, really speak to that. Feel free to do that. We've used the line before that the guillotine is 10 steps behind us and there's nothing we'll be able to do if it gets here. Meaning, wake up, Yetzer Hara, wake up, sense of self-preservation. Your collective identity is under attack here. And if you don't do something to fix it and build trust, it could collapse right underneath you. It happens all the time in history. Greed. This is a big part of the Yetzer Hara, and this is one we can't really help or hurt. It's just the honest truth here. This is the part of their Yetzer Hara that is very much the domain of the corporate lobbyists. Cooperating with us in any way threatens this. It threatens their sense of entitlement to private money in any of the various ways that we've already studied: gifts, side jobs, campaign contributions, future revolving door jobs, etc. And these are real and valid threats to their greed, and they know it. When you deal with us, when you sign on to the gift ban, you're risking a Super Bowl ticket, you're risking a campaign contribution. Those are very real threats to their sense of greed and self-preservation. We can work with their power and their ambition inside the legislature. We can't work well with it. It usually works against us, because working with us can hurt your power inside the legislature. That's a very valid threat. That's very real for a legislator's Yetzer Hara. There's an old saying in politics, and God, I wish we really had a better nonviolent vocabulary, but here we are. There's an old saying in politics that if you're going to shoot the king, you need to kill the king, because if you don't, the king will kill you. And we always need to work extra hard to convince a legislator's Yetzer Hara that they aren't going to be hung out to dry, that they are safe taking action within their own institution. A metaphor that a powerful legislator gave us 2 weeks ago was in talking about passing the gift ban. He said, "I need to pull the train into the station in such a way that I can pull the train back out of the station. I can't just crash the train into the station." And that's him saying, if I don't do this right, I'm going to lose everything. I'm going to lose my power here. Right, and what Andrea said, right? The king is in the legislature is the party leadership and their lobbyist backers, right? And what that legislator was saying is that I need to do this in such a way where I'm not going to get hung out to dry within my own institution. And our bills are only going to pass when legislators feel like passing them isn't a death blow to their political careers. Right? We need to prove to legislators that passing our bills and doing the right thing will actually help their selfish needs of power and ambition, And it's much easier to make that case for us to their power and ambition with voters, not their power and ambition within the legislature. Like their self-image and their collective self-image, their power and ambition with voters is somewhere where we can have an impact. This is somewhere where we can really speak to their Yetzer Hara. We can help. We can boost their power and ambition with the voters. There is nothing more popular across all lines of division in Pennsylvania and almost everywhere in the world than standing against corruption and greedy politicians who hurt people with oppressive and corrupt policy violence. That is the most popular thing anybody can stand for. And even being associated with our issues is popular, and legislators want it. They want to seek it out. I remember getting a call actually yelling at me from a representative who was mentioned in a editorial in their local paper in northeastern Pennsylvania. And he thought he wasn't mentioned positively enough, but he was really happy that he was even mentioned at all. But he wanted to be mentioned more and thought that I was on the editorial board or something. That was so they want to be mentioned with this stuff. They want to be seen as being for it. It helps them with the voters. They know it. Every politician who's ever campaigned for anything has talked about draining the swamp or sweeping out the lobbyists or cleaning up corruption or changing the way things are done, taking on the status quo. They say it because they know it's popular, that it's what people want to hear. A couple weeks ago, a representative who's campaigning for higher office right now, he said that everywhere he goes across the state, gift ban is something he's hearing, especially from politically active groups. It's something popular. He knows it. He wants to be seen as being supportive of it. That's something we can work with. We can help their ambition. And negatively, we are a very valid threat that can hurt their power and ambition with the voters, right? Because we're going to force the encounter in public. And when they choose wrong, if they choose wrong, their power and their ambition with voters fades away because we only intensify our encounters and we continually force them to publicly choose to do the wrong thing and lose popular support, or do the right thing and be praised by the people. So we have that ability to affect their selfish power and ambition within the public. That's something we can affect. This is a quote from a Palestinian peace activist, a wonderful practitioner and organizer of nonviolence in the West Bank, a couple miles south of Jerusalem. And he says, extremists go all the way, while moderates tend to just go away. We are extremists for peace. Because none of this matters if they do not perceive you as an extremist for peace. And that doesn't mean that you're anywhere on the political spectrum. This is not political moderate, political extremist. No, this is extremist for peace. Somebody who's committed, somebody who's dedicated, somebody who's willing to sacrifice, somebody who's demonstrating their sacrifice. And if you can't do that, then none of the carrots or sticks that you offer the Yetzer Hara are going to be taken seriously. And none of the concern or responsibility that you're trying to evoke from their Yetzer Hatov is going to be evoked. They need to know that you tenaciously will force the encounter with them because we love them enough to talk with them about why the systemic corruption is hurting all of us and how our democracy and our society and our lives could be so much better. Their Yetzer Hatov needs to know that you believe, that your hope is unwavering, and your sacrificial actions match. Their Yetzer Hatov needs to know that you think democracy and peace are possible. They need to sense that you carry a deep love for them and that you are going to fight as hard as you can until we create a world of democracy and peace. They need to know that you and the group that you are part of are frankly delusional and crazy enough to knock 1,000 doors for whoever runs against them in a primary or a general election. That you will show up to their campaign fundraisers uninvited, that you'll write letters to the editor, tag them endlessly on Twitter, show up to their town halls, hold billboards outside of their district offices, set up a table at the train station in their district, and tell everybody that you're protecting corruption and ask them, why? Why is he doing that? Or that you're just going to keep lobbying them until they get tired of the bad conscience that you're giving them and their staff stop respecting them because they see what an asshole they're being. That happens. And if not, if they don't convert, if they don't do the right thing, then they will continue to act. I'm sorry, and if not, if they don't see you as an extremist, as somebody who's willing to fight, willing to sacrifice, then they're going to continue to act on the belief that it's better for their self-image, their collective image, their greed, their power, their ambition to just ignore you, that you are not a real threat or asset to their Yetzer Hara, and their Yetzer Hara will contain and constrain their sense for the other, their altruism, their patriotism, their service. It'll constrain it because it isn't safer to be hopeful or do the right thing. And when it's not safe to do the right thing, the Yetzer Hara beats out the Yetzer Tov every time. You need to let them know that you're in it to win it. We're going to take a break. This has been a lot. We're going to send around the slides afterward. So if you missed anything, you can go back. This has been a lot. We're going to take a 5-minute break, come back at 8 o'clock and do some discussion and some processing and some, deep thinking around what we've been talking about. I'll see y'all at 8 o'clock. Okay, let's get back to it here. As people come back, I just want to create space for us as a group here. If anybody has any questions or thoughts or any clarifying questions, or if none of this makes sense, or if a piece of it doesn't make sense or anything like that.
I have a question. It's not terribly related to this, but step 3, the word kill, the political world really stood out for me. But I don't know how to put this in perspective. When there are good people, genuine good people that want to do well, they want to do good. It just seems that they're assassinated, like John F. Kennedy, other, international, not well-known political figures, like I'm thinking in the 1990s in Mexico and TJ, a gentleman by the name of Colosio was like running for office, and then all of a sudden he's assassinated, and it's like, okay, well, they took him out before he even won. So I don't know, just I don't know how to explain my question. I guess people, I don't know. The powers that be put a stop, like if they really want to bring change or something. Like Obama, for example, thank God he wasn't assassinated, but I also read articles how he requested the Secret Service, like even way before other candidates, and how there were people in other states, going into town halls where he would speak armed citizens. And it's like, hello, that shouldn't happen.
Yeah, assassinations are an extreme reaction of the Yetzer Hara, right? That's an extreme reaction of somebody feeling like they're under attack and then lashing out with violence in an unreasonable, always unreasonable manner, and always disproportionate to the actual threat, right? The perceived threat is never what they make it, up to be in order to commit an act of murder. I'm thinking of Yitzhak Rabin is another leader who was assassinated. He was the prime minister in Israel who 30 years ago signed the Oslo Peace Accords, which was going to end the conflict that is now raging once again, for seventh escalation since Oslo fell now. And Rabin was assassinated. He was killed because somebody was very threatened by the idea of peace and reacted from a place of defensiveness and response to that threat, and in an overreactive manner, killed him. And the Yetzer Hara that exists in the ruling class will flare up, and it will affect people in the working class as well to flare up and get active. Yeah, it's an ugly thing that happens, and that's it's also for the purposes of this class too. It is something that politicians at high levels think about. It is something they consider, that their Yetzer Hara will pipe up and say, do this and you'll get killed. And there are red lines in our society that a lot of them don't cross for fear of that. You brought up JFK. A lot of people think he crossed the red line of criticizing the military industrial complex. That's a thing that politicians consider. If I do this, is that threat valid? Sometimes it's valid enough for them to not do the right thing. But anyway, any other questions or thoughts? Yeah. Assassinations are a very ugly end result of an overreactive Yetzer Hara. Okay. Can't believe nobody challenged the complete oversimplification that Musar presents of the human psyche. I mean, people have spent the last century ripping Freud apart for saying what I just said. Right? Everything here is an oversimplification. It's a generalization. I just want to acknowledge that. Okay, so let's do an exercise. Prophets are, in the words of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, witnesses to the meaning beyond mystery. And so we need to carry a sense of meaning into meetings. We need to believe in democracy. We need to believe that with painful and active hope, we can win democracy. We can lessen the suffering of people. We need to believe these things. Right? We need to witness the meaning beyond mystery. We need to look into the face of absurdity and proclaim holiness. We need to challenge the void. So we're going to do a prophetic exercise that's going to help us tend to our own prophetic fire and find our voice, and really try to identify and help us find that meaning beyond mystery for ourselves, and also help us articulate some aspects of our Yetzer HaTov. We're going to do a burning bush exercise. So the burning bush is a famous biblical story referenced in revolutionary movements by prophets throughout time. In April 1968, on April 3rd, 1968, Dr. King referenced it in a famous speech he gave in Memphis, Tennessee. It's the I Have Been to the Mountaintop speech. And in that speech, the day before he was assassinated by a overprotective, overreactive Yetzer Hara, he said that he talked about the burning bush. He talked about how Bull Connor, the Southern sheriff, the enemy of the civil rights movement, the oppressor, didn't understand history. And he didn't understand history because he didn't understand that there is a fire that no water hoses can put out. And what King was talking about was the burning bush, that the burning bush is an unquenchable fire. And the burning bush story is a model for tending that fire that cannot be put out, not even by water hoses, not by anything. When the burning bush happened, Moses had been living his life as a criminal outcast refugee. He had committed murder in Egypt, fled into the desert, and should have lived the rest of his life out in the desert and died, and that should have been it. But the burning bush happens. And at the burning bush, Moses goes through a process and he becomes Moses. So let's go through that process together here. So it begins with wonder and gratitude. That's the first step. There are 4 steps. I'll just tell you them all right now. We're going to go through wonder and gratitude, suffering, finding our story, and action. So wonder and gratitude here. So Moses, I'm just going to kind of skim through this here. Moses is out. He's a shepherd, right? He's tending the flock of his father-in-law out in Midian. This is close to Mount Sinai. It's called Horeb here. And there, the angel of God appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. And I also just want to stress, whatever your particular religious belief is, whether this is literal to you or metaphorical, it's okay. Lean into it. Interpret this how you need to. Moses saw that the bush was on fire, but it did not burn up. And so Moses thought, I'll go over there and see this strange sight. Right? Moses had a moment of wonder. And he asked himself, why does the bush not burn up? And God saw that he had gone over to look, and God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. So noticing holiness, noticing with wonder, showing gratitude, the taking off of the sandals is one way to display gratitude, is an essential first step in tending to our own burning bush and cultivating our own fire. And I know it can sound trivial sometimes to some people, but it is a crucial first step to notice the good, to notice what we're grateful for, to not take anything for granted, to notice with wonder the world around us. It's the essential first step. Let's go to the next slide here. And as Heschel says, wonder or radical amazement is the chief characteristic of the religious person's attitude toward history and nature. One attitude is alien to their spirit, taking things for granted. So we're going to do a breakout room now, and I'd like breakout rooms of 2 to 3 people, and to really just focus on this question of gratitude and wonder. What are you grateful for in our world with regard to democracy and the fight for democracy? What are you grateful for, right? It's not all bad. There's definitely good in there. There's definitely things to build off of. There's definitely things to be grateful for. There's definitely things to wonder and marvel at. And let's just go into breakout rooms for a few minutes and just discuss this and really focus for a second on gratitude.
Michael, I'm going to join one of them.
Back, everybody. Okay, so let's make some space as a team. Anything come up? Anything anybody wants to share?
Sue Ellen I had a hard time coming up with something to be grateful about politics, to be honest with you, Michael. But she was very gracious, my partner, and said, we're grateful for each other and the people that we have come before us and the people that we hope to meet in the future and the people we meet in the rooms that I've been frequented with you and other folks. So it's very nice. So.
And I want to share that it is definitely hard to find something to be grateful for in politics, and in this question, I don't look in that direction at all. To speak personally, I look toward the movement, just like you did, toward the community. That's where my gratitude is directed.
Right on.
Yeah.
Oh, Sue Ellen, she gets credit for it. She reeled me in. I was on the edge.
Jason.
Yeah, I had to look like one of the things I was grateful for is that here you can talk to your elected representatives. I've talked to my city council member, I've talked to state senator, state representative, and I was on a Zoom call with my congressperson not that long ago. So it's something you can do it's not something you need to spend money on and things like that. And I was talking to Leslie, I was comparing it to like, what if this was a monarchy? What would you have to do to talk to the king? If the king's the only person in the kingdom that can grant you your one wish or whatever you need, what would you have to do? So some people are doing that, and I think it's costing a lot, So that's one of the things I was grateful for.
Absolutely, right? That's something I think about all the time, that we can even go and talk to these people, right? That we can walk up to them, that we can do this, that we can set up meetings, that we know where they work. We even just that we know where they are sometimes is really something to be grateful for, because there's a lot of setups that aren't like that at all. It's not easy to go and lobby, Mohammed bin Salman, for example, and in Saudi Arabia. It's not easy to even know where he is, let alone go talk to him. We can do that. We have the and I'm extremely grateful for the ability to go talk to them, for the ability to gather in the public square, is something to be grateful for, and something to be built off of. The ability to march through the streets, to the ability to be active civically, publicly, is a huge thing that's not to be taken for granted at all. Yeah.
I'm grateful that people are willing to run for office and people are willing to put in the hours as staffers. And it's a great responsibility to write a law, or bill.
Absolutely. Oh my God, so grateful for people who jump into the arena, with good intentions and a clear heart, and try to do their best. And just to echo the gratitude towards staffers, oh my God, do they not get paid enough to do the work? And a lot of them are really working from a place of service, because they certainly could get paid more elsewhere. Sadly, a few of them do take those future jobs, but a lot of them are in there for the right reasons, and definitely sacrificing.
I'm grateful for the indivisible groups that have sprung up, and the advocacy group that I'm part of. And I'm also grateful for the fact that every morning I read Heather Cox Richardson, and she's very inspiring, but the fact that she's permitted to write all of these things, and make some critical remarks about what is going on in our federal government, I just think that those things are very inspiring to me.
Absolutely. It is definitely something to be grateful for. People who tell the truth, and groups that organize and fight the good fight. And Andrea, what you just wrote, especially grateful for the grassroots backed folks who are running up against incumbent candidates who have an endless stream of cash. Absolutely. Oh my God, the folks across the state who just run up against the machine and do their best, and sometimes they win. I think in Dauphin County, the new county commissioner who just came in, he came to one of our Disrupt the Corrupt events, earlier this year. And, we had a really honest conversation about what it's like to run up against the machine. And my God, he put in the hustle, the work, sweat, and tears and all that, and did it. Really well done. Yeah, definitely. Any other gratitudes, or let's move on here. So step 2 is going to take us into suffering. We have to be honest about suffering. As the poet Omar Safed says, the wound is where the light enters you. If you can't acknowledge the suffering, you can't move toward a solution. So at the burning bush, God called to Moses from the bush, "Moses, Moses." And Moses answered, "Here I am." God said, "I have seen my people's oppression and poverty, and I have heard their cries." Right? It happens. The part of the process is God acknowledging God's suffering, God acknowledging the people's suffering, that acknowledgement of suffering and honesty around suffering. And there's an old rabbinic tale that asks the question, why does God say Moses, Moses? Why is the name repeated? Why does it say Moses twice? And the answer is it's because it's a sign of distress. God is calling out under distress, like somebody who's carrying too heavy of a burden and needs somebody to help carry the load. Moses, Moses, help. It's a cry of desperation. God is suffering, God sees our suffering, and that acknowledgement of suffering allows for us to take steps toward healing that suffering. The next breakout room, we're going to go into in a second here for a few minutes is going to discuss this. And this is going to be a heavy conversation. Please be kind to each other. Don't share if you don't feel comfortable sharing, or share as much as you do feel comfortable sharing. We're going to be asking the question, what breaks your heart? What shatters your indifference? What suffering are you responding to? Right? In order to tell your story, in order to activate their Yetzer Tov, you need to be in touch with what hurts you, who you feel responsible for, what suffering you're responding to. Mary Oliver, a great poet, wrote, "I tell you this to break your heart, by which I mean only that it breaks open and never close again to the rest of the world." We need to be able to crack our hearts open. We need to be able to understand why we're fighting this fight. Why are we doing this? What breaks your heart? What shatters your indifference? What are you responding to? Let's go back into those breakout rooms, and I'll call back in about 4 minutes. Welcome back, everybody. Would anybody like to share anything with the group? Well, good. If not, we'll go for it. I'll share the suffering that I'm responding to. A lot of the time, it's just the general suffering of poverty, just the violence that inflicts, the misery that causes, the sheer absurdity of it. Just breaks my heart, and is often the suffering that I'm responding to. The suffering of living through ecological devastation is heartbreaking. Is absolutely a suffering that I respond to. What the suffering of gun violence. What about for you all? The suffering of dear friends. Yeah.
I think one of the things we talked about, at least I did, was the sadness that when you look at people who take pleasure in being powerful, having a lot of money, who put other people in these positions, the heartlessness of those people, who I feel should be humiliated by their behavior if they took a look at themselves. I find that just unbearable.
Yeah, just to agree with it, I find it sad, and I find it pitiful in the sense that I pity people who are trapped in the rat race of power and greed, trapped in that idol worship of power and greed that just gets you nowhere, just creates misery for you and everyone around you. I feel bad and sad when talking to legislators, and want to honor their suffering too. These people, they drop dead pretty regularly. They get really sick really fast. Their hair goes gray much more quickly than it should. It's just not easy to keep all those lies straight. It's not easy to keep all the power hungry games going at the same time. It wears on you. It gives you ulcers. It's not a healthy way of living life, and you're missing out on the joy of living a life by your Yetzer Tov, living a life by what's good in the world. And it's sad. Yeah. Their suffering is real. And when lobbying them, again, think of it almost as a liberation meeting for them. You're giving them a way out. You're giving them a way out of the endless fundraisers, the constant need to get drunk with lobbyists, things that might be fun once or twice, but after a while, you're locked in a phone booth with a telemarketer. It's not a good life. Jason.
One of the things my partner and I talked about in the breakout room was homelessness. How they're in the absurdity of living in the richest country in the world, and there being so many homeless people and everywhere. Even I used to work in the middle of New Jersey. It's called Logan Township, and there's homeless people there. It's not just like an urban problem. There are homeless people in suburbs, There are homeless people in the Northeast, these very nice houses. There's homeless people in so many places that we're uh, through whatever reason they're homeless. They're people, and we can afford to house them. And we're better off if we do, and if we don't, it's not just more compassionate. There's a benefit to it. They can build lives because they have houses, and if
Yep.
they can't build those lives, they turn to drug. They do all the other sorts of things. They turn to drugs to soothe themselves from the absurdity of their own lives, the hopelessness of their own lives.
Absolutely, absolutely, and the suffering is so absurd, as you noted. It's such an absurd form of suffering, and it's such a violent manifestation of poverty. It's an extreme manifestation of poverty, and it is incredibly absurd, incredibly absurd. And this is a whole nother discussion for maybe a spring course or something. But there is a setup that we live in that encourages that Yetzer Hara mentality to emerge, that scarcity mindset, and keeps us trapped in a scarcity mindset. George Carlin used to say, poor people are there to keep middle class people showing up to their jobs. And homeless people are a visible manifestation to scare the crap out of the rest of us. And to keep us desperate in a world of scarcity and fearful, because in that world we're willing to do terrible things to each other. That's a big thought for another day. Yeah. Let's keep going here. It's 8:34. We're going to close out hopefully by 8:45 or so. And thank you all for staying with it. This is a heavy class. There's a lot to cover here. The next step of the burning bush story is finding ourselves in a longer story. Right? We talked about the power of story earlier. We're going to get good at telling our story, at finding our story, because you need to find yourself in a story. And there needs to be a past, a present, and a future to that story. So at the burning bush, Moses is placed into the middle of a story. God, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, appeared to me and said. So right away, this is the before. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, those are your ancestors. That's who came before you. That's chapter 1 of the story. And said, I have watched over you and have seen what has been done to you in Egypt. That's right now. And I promise to bring you up out of your misery into a land flowing with milk and honey. That's the future. It started with the ancestors way back when. It's happening right now, and it's going to end in the future in the promised land, a land flowing with milk and honey. There's a beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end. And all of us are involved in these stories. This is the story of the Exodus here. We all have different stories that we're a part of. We're all parts of stories that are ongoing. The story of American democracy, the story of movement building, the stories of our families, the stories of the evolution of ideas, the stories of our hobbies. We're all parts of these stories. So this is just going to be a solo reflection to try to just think through a story. And I really hope you focus on kind of the story of democracy or your story in the democracy movement or something related to democracy and the movement world. But if you want to kind of lean into the story of people becoming kind to each other or something more generic, feel free to. And just also want to make some space before we go into this solo reflection, where we're just going to turn our cameras off for 5 minutes and draw or write out a 3-panel comic strip with that past, present, and future of the story. Does this make sense? Does this assignment make sense before we break out? No. Okay, I'm getting no. So a story of American democracy could be it starting off with the first panel of the U.S. Constitution being written and 5% of the public being able to vote, white landowning males being able to vote. The middle panel could be you voting in your local election, and the future panel could be 100% enfranchisement, voting rights for all, everybody's voting. That's kind of a generic example there. The stories of movements in the past of the civil rights movement or of the suffragette movement, movements that have pushed democracy forward, you in the middle going to lobby your representative. And then the future is all the movements celebrating that they won. There's no more need for movements. What is the story that you're in the middle of here? Does that make sense? And any other?
I might just add, like, it might be helpful to kind of reflect and look back into that place of when you had some sort of like strong realization about politics or the way that our world operates, like when you reach some sort of deeper political consciousness. That's what I'm going to be looking back to.
Here. Oh, no, sorry. Jason, you named a story earlier already. Just to name one more. The idea of, in the past, going to talk to the king was a very hard thing to do. In the present, going to talk to the legislature is a much easier thing to do. In the future, maybe it's not one person approaching someone else in power, it's everybody in a circle talking things out, because we're, far more democratic in our decision making. I'll be back together in 4 minutes. Okay, let's bring it back together. Please, outside of this class, take more time to sit with some of these questions if you want and really dive in deeper. We're shortchanging them all tonight. Please do this exercise, routinely. Anybody want to share any stories they had there? Jason, please.
So before, few people voted. People were indifferent and apathetic. During, we fixed democracy with citizen lobbying. We removed corruption, gerrymandering, and made it so there was more democracy for the people. And after more people voted and politicians spent their time with voters, not telemarketing or constantly fundraising.
Here.
Yeah.
That's the story. I think we're all part of that one. There it is. Here. Well done. Anybody else have a story to share? Oh, and Jason, if you don't mind, I'm going to add one more line to your third panel there. And homelessness is eradicated. Because any government that's responsive to its people doesn't let that happen to its people. Any other stories that anybody wants to share? I think Jason nailed the one that we're all in here together doing. Okay, so let's go on to the fourth and final step here of the Burning Bush Project is force the encounter. We end up right where we started here, force the encounter. It says in Exodus, right? God tells Moses, go and assemble the elders, then you shall go with the elders to Pharaoh and say, ... The famous lines, let my people go, or what follows there, right? Go and assemble the elders, then you shall go with the elders to Pharaoh and say, you get organized, you take action. You get organized, you force the encounter. get organized, you go talk to Pharaoh. You get organized, you go to the legislature. That's the fourth and final step. Get organized, take action, force the encounter. And so we're going to move into a closing here. This is a line from Kafka. I just wanted to kind of close out with this here. It's aimed directly at the Yetzer Hara. I know it hits my Yetzer Hara right in the Yetzer Hara, and I think it might do the same for others as well. Because it often seems to me, to my Yetzer Hara, that the safest and the least painful thing is to avoid encountering absurdity. It's to stay home. It's to not go in and force the encounter. And Kafka tells us here, that avoidance is in fact the only pain you can actually avoid. That the only pain you can actually avoid is avoiding the suffering of the world, the encounters with absurdity. And Kafka wrote in his journals, "You can hold yourself back from the sufferings of the world. That is something you are free to do. But perhaps this very holding back is the one suffering you could avoid." Right? This is a good way to kind of subvert your Yetzer Hara into Yetzer HaTov. To take that idea that your Yetzer Hara is putting forward, forcing the encounter with absurdity is a threat to you. It's a threat to your safety. It's a threat to your time. It's a threat to your well-being. And you're taking that and you're flipping it on its head and you're saying, actually, the real threat to my well-being is not caring. The real threat to my well-being is living a life of indifference. The only suffering you can avoid is avoiding suffering. Let's go one more slide here. We have to also end with another Heschel quote, just to round it out here, give him the last word. "Remember that there is a meaning beyond absurdity. Know that every deed counts, that every word is power, and above all, remember that you must build your life as if it were a work of art. There is meaning beyond absurdity. Holiness conquers absurdity. Every deed counts." And live your life as if it were a work of art. Oh, beautiful. So these are just some resources to learn more about anything we really talked about tonight, and to take deeper dives. Really, I recommend going on taking lobbying on as a spiritual task, and really diving into the philosophies that undergird that. A great Musar book, if anyone's interested, A Responsible Life by Ira Stone. Great books on the prophets, The Prophetic Imagination by Walter Brueggemann, The Prophets by Abraham Joshua Heschel. And then just a good, easy introduction to Gandhi is The Penguin Gandhi Reader, edited by Rudrangshu Mukherjee. And then I threw in just this last chapter from the Bible, Nehemiah chapter 5, where Nehemiah, the prophet and the governor, goes in and organizes an assembly against the ruling class and forces a debt cancellation by forcing the encounter for all the people. It's just a great example of forcing the encounter and winning a debt cancellation, evoking their Yetzer HaTov and speaking to their Yetzer Hara. All this is also, as Andrea just wrote, going to go out tomorrow in an email, all this information. And then, of course, every class, we have this next slide here to join Slack, join Slack, join Slack. And here is the link. If you're not already a member, please click that link in the chat. Join Slack. It's our central communications platform. It's how we stay in touch with each other. And if you're having technical troubles, just reach out to us and we'll help you out. Donate, got to make the pitch. It's Giving Tuesday tomorrow. This is the time of year when most people do this kind of thing. Please do make a donation. The link is going to be in the chat here. As I'm sure you're very aware, we're not funded by Axon. Please do make a donation if you can. And then announcements here at the end. You're going to get a recording of this email to you. Please feel free to share it and invite others to join the class. The next class is next week, same time, same Zoom link, next Monday, 7 o'clock. Giving Tuesday is tomorrow. Please make a donation if you're able and feel so moved. December 12th is our next in-person lobbying day in Harrisburg. And then the Poor People's Campaign, March 2nd and March 4th. Please put those dates on your calendar and save the date. March 2nd is a massive rally in Harrisburg, and March 4th is a demands delivery and action day in Harrisburg with the Poor People's Campaign. It's going to be a lot of fun. Please do save the date there. And then next week, we're going to be focusing in the lobbying course on studying our policies and learning how to not be wrong. That is something that my Yetzer Hara constantly fears, is the embarrassment of being wrong, factually incorrect. And next week, we're going to really safeguard against that together. We're going to study our policies. We're going to know our stuff. We're going to really know how to talk policy here. And then the week after that, we're going to be taking a less spiritually focused approach to lobbying, kind of focusing on some more mechanical features of it. Scheduling meetings, setting up meetings, conducting meetings, looking at it through the lens of kind of more secular conflict resolution theory. And then we're going to be, doing some practice, and then y'all are good to go and set up meetings and knock it out. How's everyone doing? Okay, we're going to close it out with how we started it. Everybody come off mute at the same time and say your favorite thing that you ate within the last week. Bonus points if you have leftovers and are going to eat it later tonight. 1, 2, 3. Brisket.
Cheesecake.
Hazelnut
Corn
cookies.
casserole.
Everybody, see you next week.
Thank you.